here to talk about my own life. In the first half of my life, I struggled to be a normal guy, to be a real man. That didn't turn out so well. The good news is, in the second half of my life, I gave that up, and things worked out much better. So why the change of course? Well, it was an unexpected encounter with radical feminist writing that critiqued patriarchy. It led to meeting radical feminists living in a patriarchal society who critiqued men's sexual exploitation of women in the pornography industry, part of a patriarchal society that needed to be challenged by radical feminism. Now, you might have noticed I used radical feminist critique of patriarchy 3 times in that previous sentence. And that's my job. That's probably the most important part of my job. To be a man who stands up and repeats those terms, radical feminist critique of patriarchy, as often as possible until people stop being afraid of those terms. Now, I realize that's what we might call the kind of inescapable irony of being me. I leverage my presumed authority as a man to argue that that system that gives me that authority is very dangerous. Right? Now, my own embrace of radical feminism was neither quick nor easy. What I'd like to do is explain it to you today, to talk about why that radical feminist critique of patriarchy is so important not only for women, but for men. The evidence I want to offer is my own life. I was born in the American Midwest, the third of 4 children, into a very conventional family, which of course means a highly dysfunctional family. Yeah. Myself, I was short, skinny, effeminate growing up. I had no observable athletic ability and was rather bookish. But by the time I went to college, I was struggling to outgrow that kind of misfit profile, and I was doing my best to be a normal guy. Although I started later than most men, I eventually dated, had sex with women, told incredibly stupid sexist jokes with male friends. I used pornography, and I wallowed in my unhappiness. What changed for me was encountering a very unexpected encounter with radical feminism and a chance to change. Right? Now, what is radical feminism? It's a critique of institutionalized male dominance. Women are more familiar with it than men, but for men it's very important as well. Although I grew up in that skinny, nerdy category, and it's easy to understand why I never felt like I was a real man, right? I assumed other men were doing fine. But as I got older and talked to men, I realized that even the men I thought were the standard were also struggling with that. What I learned is that every man I ever met at some point thought he wasn't man enough. And that's not surprising, because masculinity in patriarchy, that is, again, masculinity in a system of institutionalized male dominance, is relentlessly competitive, focused on conquest, which leads to inevitable confrontations, all with the quest of staying in control of oneself and controlling others. But here's the thing. No matter how competitive one can be, no matter how many conquests, no matter how many successful confrontations, no matter how much we stay in control of ourselves, we never really feel man enough. Right? So what I want to do is outline an argument for why men should take radical feminism seriously. Right? Now, before I do that, I've been using this term patriarchy, And you might be saying to yourself, but Jensen, isn't patriarchy an outdated term? Haven't we moved past that? I want to argue we have not. To do that, I'll quote an American sociologist, Alan Johnson, who said, in patriarchy, male privilege comes from a system that is male-dominated, male-identified, and male-centered. Now, if that went by too quickly, let me repeat. Male-dominated, that's a D. Male-identified, that's an I. Male-centered, that's a C. And I would add a friendly amendment to Alan's list and say, remember that in patriarchy, men also try to control knowledge. That would be a K, yeah. If you're having trouble remembering that, D-I-C-K. So let's ask ourselves, do we still not live in a dick society? All right. Now, in patriarchy, men have always claimed a right to own or control women's reproductive power and women's sexuality. And for me, that is the key to radical feminist insights, that men, even in the 21st century, even nice, polite, liberal men, are there any nice, polite, liberal men in the audience today? That we still so often seek to control women's bodies. Now, that's why the struggle for reproductive rights and the struggle against men's violence are so central to the feminist project. And in those arenas, we have made gains. We need to defend those gains. We need to expand them. What I want to focus on today is more distressing. It's where we have lost ground in the struggle to challenge the sexual exploitation industries. That's my term for prostitution, pornography, and stripping, where men still claim a right to own or control women's bodies. The sexual exploitation industries where men buy and sell objectified female bodies for sexual pleasure. Now, before you rush to the defense of the sexual exploitation industries and say they empower women, I want you to consider something. I think most of us in the room would agree we want to live in a stable, decent society with gender justice. The question, can you imagine creating or maintaining a stable, decent society with gender justice when one class of people, that is women and girls, can be routinely bought and sold for the sexual pleasure of another class of people, that is men? Yes, the sexual exploitation industries are complex like any other human endeavor, but the core of them is still men buying and selling women and girls, and sometimes boys and vulnerable men, almost exclusively for the sexual pleasure of men. And I want to challenge that. I'm going to make two arguments. The first is what we would call the argument from justice. That if we want to live in a stable, decent society with gender justice, if we want to take seriously the values we claim to hold, values like the inherent dignity of all people, freedom, equality, if we take those values seriously, we have to challenge the sexual exploitation industries, which are such a threat to the bodily integrity of women. That's the argument from justice. But I want to make another argument to men, that there is an argument from self-interest. That yes, in patriarchy, we get certain short-term material rewards. That being a man in patriarchy comes with some benefits, but it also comes at a great cost. And the cost is that because we never feel man enough, we are always in a very uneasy relationship to ourselves, to other men, and to women. Right? That's what I'm going to call the argument from self-interest. I want to talk about in the context of pornography. The argument from justice. Pornography is without a doubt the most intensely sexist and racist media genre in the world today. Sexist and racist both in the production of pornography, how women are treated in the industry, as well as in the images it produces as well. If we are serious about justice, we must challenge the pornography industry. But let's face it, pornography is popular with men, especially because it works. It produces a very intense, pleasurable experience with a minimal investment. Right? But when our own sexuality is so tied to the use of objectified female bodies in pornography, when our own sexuality is so dependent on a sense of control over women, we lose out on the possibility of a deeper, richer, and more meaningful sense of intimacy. Now, you might be asking, what does that look like? So let me now describe for you in some detail my own non-pornographic sexual practices. No, don't worry. I'm not going to do that. That would be highly inappropriate here. But also, there is no recipe book for what a healthy, non-patriarchal sexuality would look like. Instead of description, what I want to do is offer a metaphor. In contemporary culture, we talk so often about sexuality in terms of heat, yes? Hot sex. Hot sex, we're told, is the best sex. And that got me thinking about a phrase we use in the United States to describe an argument, a debate, which is angry, blustery, lots of shouting, but very little listening and learning. We often say such a debate produced more heat than light. And that got me thinking, what if our goal in sexuality, what if the way we connect with each other physically was less about heat and more about light? What if the way we touch was not in search of desperate search of hot sex, but in search of that light that can illuminate self and others in intimacy? Right. There is no intimacy instruction manual that anyone can hand you. But I do know that in my own life, after I embraced radical feminism and began that long and very difficult process of trying to dismantle my own pornographic imagination, that new space opened up for me. Right. That's the argument from self-interest, that if we want to be fully human, that is, if we want to go beyond just chasing pleasure, we have to critique the way we've been socialized to see women as objectified female bodies for our sexual pleasure. Now, so far I've been talking in a heterosexual context. A brief aside, gay men have a stake in this as well, because although we're told that gay men aren't real men, gay men are also socialized to act like real men. And the domination and subordination dynamic that one sees in heterosexual pornography is also present in gay pornography. I do think gay men have a stake in this as well. Our relationships can deepen when we can escape that pornographic imagination. So let me now give you Robert Jensen's 3 easy steps to radical feminism for men. Yeah, there's not 3 easy steps. I was kidding again. Right. There certainly are not only 3, they aren't easy, and I certainly do not have the ability to give them to you. Instead, I just want to end with the recognition that when we as men are told that feminism is a threat to us, in some sense that is correct. It's a threat to our ability to hold on to what we might call normal guyness. But if we're willing to let go of the pathology of patriarchy, what we'll find is that feminism, especially the most radical feminism, the feminism we are told to fear the most, is in fact not a threat to men. It is an incredible gift to us. Thank you.